Good day and happy new year to you stoners. 2021. Who would have thought we made it this far, especially the 2020 that we've been through with COVID and all that crap? We got there, and guess what? Sam's here too. Sam, how you going?
Terry, yeah, very good. Happy New Year to you as well. Hope you
Thank
had a
you.
good celebration to bring in the new year. But yeah, new year, hopefully better than 2020. We faced a few challenges, I think everyone around the world. So hopefully it's a good year.
We certainly did face a few challenges, and I guess 2021 can be a fresh start for many people. And I thought, well, what a great topic to discuss in terms of fresh starts than, say, the United Kingdom and Great Britain.
Mm,
They've got a real fresh start as of the 1st of January. Brexit has finally happened, Sam.
yes, yeah,
Wowee.
huge.
It's full in force. And I guess, let's probably start things off. And it's no surprise, but we've just let the cat out of the bag that today's
Mm,
episode is about the Brexit. And we're just going to enlighten the stoners, you guys listening and watching on YouTube now. We're just letting everyone know that we've got a brand new YouTube channel. So just look up Turning Stones Podcast on YouTube and you should find us and a couple of videos that we've uploaded.
yes, yes.
So that's for you to have some eye candy as well as some ear candy. So, yeah, give us a subscribe on that. Give us a follow. And, of course, we're in all the great podcast places as well. Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts, CastBox. So many more to pick from. I
Mm,
mean, really, Sam, we're
all of them.
giving the stoners this option and ability wherever they are,
Yes, yeah,
whenever they are, to either watch, listen, or both.
yeah, that's right.
Imagine you're a stoner. Like, how lucky and fortunate are you?
I feel like I won the lottery, to be honest, Terry. That's amazing. But yeah, if anyone's got any ideas or requests for topics, we're happy to have a look at them. We're not going to guarantee we'll cover the topic, but we'll have a look at it and we'll consider it, sit down, and if we go ahead with it, well, there you go. We'll go ahead with it.
Absolutely. Well said, Sam. And just our handle on Instagram and Twitter, what is that again?
Yeah, at Turnstones Pod.
That's the one.
That's the one. Yep,
Yeah,
beautiful.
you
I
ripper.
thought so.
All right, so the Brexit, Sam, and the
Yes.
Stoners. So Britain broke from the European Union's regulatory orbit on the 1st of January 2021. So this is pretty fresh and pretty brand new.
Mm,
So, hot off the heels of starting off 2021. So basically, this was basically casting off the European bloc, which have been in there for over half a century. So it's been a long time coming, and we'll get to some of the reasons and logic as to why they left and how long they've been in there for and all that sort of stuff. But while it left formally in January 2020, it's been actually 11 months since Britain has been in a bit of a transition period. So they sort of voted this in 2016 through a referendum we'll get to in a little bit. But since 2016 all the way to January 2020, I guess there's a massive debates and I guess implementation strategies how it's going to actually happen. Then in
mm,
January 2020, it sort of on paper was official. However, still up until January 2021, which we're in right now,
yeah.
it's now fully enacted. However, those last 11 months was a massive transition period. So it's going to be interesting to see how the two sides' futures go after this Brexit. It will be interesting, and I'm guessing there are some pros and cons on both sides, and I guess that's probably why it was a massive contentious debate over the last 4 years since 2016. But
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, I guess, basically, well, you know what? Instead of me explaining it, we'll throw it over to you, Sam.
Yeah.
Tell us, what is the
No
Brexit?
worries.
And go from there.
No worries. Thanks, Terry. Yeah, Brexit. Obviously, it's a little bit of a play on words. Comes from, if you haven't already picked it up, a combination of the word Britain and exit. So referring to them exiting the
Oh,
European
wow.
Union. Doesn't take Einstein to work that one out, but just in case you didn't know, we do hear hear the word a lot. So it's been in the news since 2016, like you said, Terry, and it's I can't believe it's that long ago, really, that the referendum decision was handed up, because it feels like it was yesterday, to be honest. But yeah,
Just quickly on that, Sam.
Yes, yeah.
Funnily enough, I was in England when they voted for the Brexit.
Oh, wow.
I was in London, and I remember watching BBC. I was bored. It was in between getting ready to go to a restaurant on a Saturday night, and I remember watching the BBC going through the Brexit, and it was just weird times to be there, actually,
Yeah.
because I think the population was so split. So that's just a little tidbit for the stoners. Continue.
Thank you. Did you manage to slip a vote in, mate? Or?
No, I'm obviously that's illegal to do so. So, of course, you're not going to see me doing such things.
No way. So Brexit, it refers to the proposal that Britain splits from the European Union and changes relationship to the bloc on trade, security, and migration. And yes, the referendum decision was on the 23rd of June 2016, and it was in favour to leave the European Union. So people on the street, every person in Britain, well, not every person in Britain, the majority in Britain decided that they thought it was a good idea to leave the European Union, and it was a pretty big deal at the time. It's probably one of the biggest things that has happened to Britain in the last, I'd say, even 100 years, Terry. But pretty huge. Now, a bit of history around Brexit, or history around the membership to the European Union for Britain. So Britain sort of they've been debating this for a while, the pros and cons of being a part of the European nations. It's been going on for about 80 years, apparently, Terry, and it's something I didn't really know. It was a long-term sort of, consideration and up and down and whether they should stay or leave. But yeah, apparently it was, and especially in the years after World War II, apparently it was really a big hot topic. And even in the 1960s, back then in the 60s, it applied twice for membership. What was then the European Economic Community, only to be vetoed both times by France. Then we fast forward to 1973. Britain finally joined the club. It held its first referendum on whether to leave less than 3 years later. So they joined this European, sort of club. Within less than 3 years later, they had a vote because they weren't sure whether they wanted to stay or leave. So it sounded like they're a bit undecided, the British. At the time, 67% of voters supported staying within that little European club. Ever since then, it's sort of been up and down. 2013, Prime Minister David Cameron promised that a national referendum on the EU again was going to be settling the question once and for all. And there was really two options. It's pretty simple. You had either remain or leave, and everyone in the country was, in that region was forced. I reckon they were it was a compulsory voting system. I think, apparently we've heard that at the time, the Prime Minister thought that everyone was going to, it was going to be a massive one-sided affair, and that everyone would be happy to stay within the European Union. But it turned out to be the opposite way. I guess it's happened before in the political atmosphere, the political. Space. Oh my God, I'm lost for words.
Have a drink of water, Sam, would you, please?
Yes, I might have to.
That bloody Prime Minister Cameron, eh?
Yes,
that's a big miscalculation from him.
It is, and a bit like the Donald Trump election when he initially got elected. That was a bit of a, miscalculation on everyone's behalf, and turned out to be the underdog prevailing. Which, in this case, I think was the case as well. And voters went to the polls, and everyone sort of wanted to leave. I mean, apparently there was a bit of an issue there with the refugee crisis that was happening around 2016 when the voting happened, and there was a bit of political rage across Europe. So there was a bit of a miscommunication, just mixed signals and things like that. So they ended up voting to withdraw from the European Union. So
just quickly on the polls and stuff. These pre-election polls. Who votes in these polls? I've never ever been asked to vote in a poll. And if you're a stoner out there, and you have voted in a poll, hit us up on Instagram or Twitter and let us know about it, because I'm really curious as to how the media outlets decide these pre-election polls. And I mean, Prime Minister David Cameron's only going off the information he had at hand, and obviously some of his, colleagues or, subordinates below him were, indicating that, it's going to be a landslide in terms of Remain in the European Union. And he was probably wanting for it to go down that path as well. And yet, obviously, the voters went completely the other way. It wasn't a landslide victory by any means necessary. However, still, a win's a win, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. And, it wasn't a landslide. It was only 52% of voters were in support of leaving the European Union. Interesting fact there as well, Terry. Northern Ireland and Scotland voted against Brexit. However, the population and voting numbers couldn't sway the entire of the UK. So pretty interesting there that some massive amounts of population there wanted to remain, and because the slight majority as well, wanted to leave, it went down that path. And it is interesting, Terry. Like you said, I don't know who does those pre-polling votes and things like that, whether someone's trying to influence voters. Maybe the government wanted the result to be, all right, stay in the EU, and they maybe just come up with these. I'm not saying they're committing fraud or anything, but I don't know. Maybe they select a certain amount of people that they think, these people will select to remain, and hopefully that influences other voters. Maybe, Terry, what do you reckon?
Yeah, I completely agree with you, Sam. But that interesting note that you gave me in regards to Northern Ireland and Scotland, actually in their entirety as an independent, well, I guess they're sort of independent in terms of countries. However, they're still part of the United Kingdom.
Yes.
Those two countries in particular actually voting against it just makes it very, very interesting as to how they sort of pull the votes. Do they aggregate it in terms of population numbers, which I think they did. I think they just seen everyone as a member or a citizen of the United Kingdom.
Yes.
However, they could have prorated or apportioned those votes in determining to those countries.
Yep.
And then I think ever since this referendum came about in June 2016, those two countries have actually asked to even pull away from the United Kingdom and be treated separately. However, I think Scotland, for memory, that Scotland actually had another little referendum for their own country to ask if they should leave the United Kingdom, but then that actually won 67% to stay with the UK. Right. So they had to not only weigh up the pros and cons of leaving the European Union, but they also had to weigh up the pros and cons leaving the United Kingdom. So imagine leaving two bodies. That would have been a massive hit.
Huge, yeah, jeez.
But I guess I would have left the UK to then rejoin the EU. So many things to I guess dive deep into, and so many factors to consider. I mean, really, to be honest with you, I'm not sure how educated the voters or the citizens were of the UK, but I hope they really were, because it was a massive decision to make, and there's some dire consequences.
Yeah, of course, spot on. And it could just be a bit of a bit of that sheep mentality, and people are hearing, everyone wants to leave, and is sort of following the trend. Maybe I don't know, but you're right, Terry. I don't think many people would have considered the economic impacts that it would have. So why don't you jump in and tell us why it's a good idea to leave, and why the result might have been a good one.
Yeah, sure, Sam. Absolutely, I'll definitely run into that. So why is leaving the European Union a good idea for the UK? So obviously we're now just going back retrospectively and weighing up both options of why it was good to leave or why it was good to stay. Yes. So I'm gonna go through why it was good to leave, and Sam, if you don't mind afterwards, give us the pros of why it was good to stay. No, so good idea to leave the European Union for the UK. Well, pulling out of the EU would actually remove the UK of the European Union's decision-making process. So it'd actually be a lot more autonomous in its own decision-making. And that's more of at a federal level, even though it's still its own governing body, the UK. It just wouldn't have to run past any European Union councils or any committees or past the other presidents. So basically now, or if they, well, given that they have left, but before that, it was basically just telling the public that if we leave, guess what? It's just going to streamline red tape a little bit more, and we'll get to, I guess, govern our country a lot more independently, which I guess every country would love that sort of flexibility and autonomous nature. Next on the list is leaving the European debt crisis, which is massive for the country. And I think this would be a big selling point as well, especially to those that, I guess, are not only politically minded, but I would say even to the seniors. Like, imagine your government telling you that you have to take, pension cuts, medicals dropping off in terms of the amount of subsidies and rebates because we have to fund debt. Now, most of this debt isn't part of the UK didn't accumulate this debt, but because we're part of the European Union and other countries falling behind that have accumulated the debt, we have to chip away at that as well. So this is a massive, pro to basically all the citizens out there. I'm not just saying the elderly, but all the citizens that, hey, we're just actually removing and leaving a lot of debt behind, which is actually a green tick for me as well. And especially for both of us as accountants, the moment you can reduce your liabilities without any, adverse impact to your financials, then double thumbs up, just like our sponsor, Damn Cheap Wholesalers. Sure, Joseph and the team there will enjoy that plug. So also, immigration and terrorism would actually be heavily scrutinized and the risk levels reduced, respectively. So basically, by leaving the European Union, there's going to be a bit more border protection, and also there's going to be a bit more of an onerous procedures and tasks to actually become a migrant of the UK, which then throws it out there saying that there's going to probably be a lot more jobs for locals that are actually living in the UK as opposed to people coming from overseas and taking those particular roles. And also terrorism. Well, getting into the country, who's to say that terrorists weren't coming and landing in Europe first and then going into the UK because of the European Union, the cross borders. Honestly, like I've been to Europe and going from one country to another is exactly like going from one state to another state in Australia. So basically, as soon as you arrive in Europe, wherever your first location is, you stamp your passport, then any other location you stay within the European Union, they check your passport, but they don't stamp it. They don't do nothing. It's just basically like checking your ID.
Yeah, just free for all.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm guessing, immigration and terrorism will definitely improve, or the negative aspects of those areas will definitely improve. Also, the UK really wanted to get away from the de facto capital of the European Union, which is in Brussels in Belgium. So Brussels in Belgium is where the headquarters of the European Union exists. And, the fact that you have to actually leave your own country to make decisions in your own country is probably not ideal. And that's one of the main reasons as well, is that not only are they pulling out of the decision-making processes of the European Union, but they're being a lot more autonomous. But guess what? Headquarters are in the UK. So good stuff.
Yes.
Also, they were just a bit wary over the last, few decades of the European Union's projects, which, potentially if going south or going sour, they could actually threaten the UK's sovereignty, its power and its authority with other nations outside Europe, and I guess with their relations in other parts of the world and other continents in Asia and the Americas. So I guess, once again, you're not part of that decision-making process. You're not part of any projects. You're not part of their debt. You're really by yourself. So really, then I guess you can it's like a clean slate. You can build your own reputation from there. I mean, everyone sort of has a bit of an idea about the Poms or the English or the United Kingdoms. But I guess this is sort of, in a commercial and business sense and an economic sense, it's sort of having a bit of a clean slate.
Yeah.
And weirdly enough, and how looking back at the history, it's been sort of topsy-turvy over the last 80 years, debating whether they should be in it, should not be in it. Well, I guess really they were never fully into the European Union if you look at the fact that they never ever adopted the euro currency. They always still managed and maintained to operate their own currency, which is the Great British Pound. So you could always tell that the UK had that sort of contingency plan by using their own currency to say, hey, one day if our agreements don't work out or shit hits the fan, we can always pull out. And I guess some of the infrastructure and the monetary side of it, which is the most important part in most aspects, is already there, and the infrastructure is already laid. So that's a big point there.
probably a good idea as well, because the British pound seems to be very strong, even compared to the euro. So it seemed to work out from the that decision with the monetary policy. But I guess like you said, Terry, sort of gave an indication that they weren't fully committed to the EU anyway. But they're probably best off worrying about themselves because Europe, like you said, is not traveling too well at the moment.
Definitely not. And also, last but not least, and there's several factors we can go through it till the cows come home. But this last one, the ability to negotiate deals with countries that currently do not have a free trade deal or agreement with the European Union. So, say I'm going to name three that we all know, and that's the USA, Australia, and New Zealand. So those three countries do not have a legitimate free trade deal with the European Union. So by the UK pulling out, they may be able to renegotiate with those three countries and boost, I guess, importing and exporting with those countries and maybe arrange a free trade agreement there, reducing taxes and tariffs, so on and so forth. So if anything, it could be a bit of a detriment with the importing, exporting, removing yourself from Europe. But with those other countries that you deal with, it could be a lot more favorable terms. But you know what? To be honest with you, Sam, just looking at those, I guess, or listening to those points as to why it was a good idea to leave and the pros to leave. If I was a citizen of the United Kingdom, I'd have a seriously good look at that and actually maybe consider myself, yes, some of these points actually are valid. And, if you're going to make this country a lot more safer with the terrorism, give it a lot more boost to, I guess, the economy with, the lack of immigration and reducing expenses in those areas.
Yep.
And of course, being autonomous, being able to make our own decisions, sounds pretty enticing to me, doesn't it?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, no, it does. And like any argument, there's always two sides to the story. And you can argue both for and against leaving the EU. But I mean, I guess if you look at the option there of leaving, it does sound pretty good, Terry. And you've obviously outlined a fair few of those. And now I'm going to go through the other side of the argument, like we said, why staying in the EU would be a good idea. Obviously, economically, there's going to be a lot of different reasons. The major ones are benefits for, trade freedom and the promotion of free trade within Europe. At the moment, or when they were a part of the EU, the United Kingdom, they were able to move freely with goods and services and capital and funding and things like that, and moving people across borders. Obviously, like you've gone through, Terry, there's some risks involved with that, especially with people crossing borders. But Europe is pretty small, I guess, and the countries themselves are pretty small, and you can travel to different countries pretty easily. So people, that are working, in a multinational, and they have to travel across the border every day for work, and travel to different countries, it's going to be a bit of a pain for them to, go to a country and have to fill out all these paperwork and whatever. I'm sure they'll have to, increase the paperwork and all the documentation that's required to actually cross the border after. So that's going to be a big issue. And also, trade and things like that within Europe is going to be a lot harder. And, I wouldn't be surprised if the other countries within the EU sort of decide that they want to cut ties with the UK with trade and stuff like that. It might be too hard to actually facilitate it after because, free trade isn't going to be possible. So very interesting in that side of, the argument as well. Companies also could buy and sell goods without paying taxes, and also they had no limits on trade volumes. This is companies that are operating within those countries that are in the EU. So obviously some benefits there tax-wise, so that's going to be lost by leaving the EU. Also avoiding potential tariffs and taxes that may be imposed when dealing with each other. So you might have, prior to this happening, prior to the Brexit, companies might have had a lot easier to deal with other companies, and now there's tariffs involved and things like this. So cost of operating business is probably going to increase. So that's another reason why you'd want to stay there, maybe, Terry. Also, we've got, Europe is Britain's most important export market and its biggest source of foreign investment. So, yeah, you're going to be really hindering that and putting some barriers in place there as well. So, again, a lot of barriers in place with leaving the EU. It's sort of, and I guess the UK sort of have their own union in the Commonwealth, I guess. Like the Commonwealth is Australia is a part of that, New Zealand and so many other countries. They've sort of got their own little group that, that they sort of operate. I don't know. To be honest, I don't even know why Australia is still involved in the Commonwealth. Because if there's no free trade agreement between the UK and Australia, well, what benefit do we have, of being within the Commonwealth? So maybe that's another topic for us to cover at a later date there, Terry.
We did have a referendum, Sam, in the year 2000, whether we should leave the Commonwealth and become a republic and be independent. And it seems as if the majority of the population said, no, we want to stay with the Commonwealth. And maybe it's time to reassess that. Obviously, the UK were a bit umming and ahhing for many years, and namely 80 years, whether they should stay with their neighbours, the European Union. Well, we're so far away from the UK, and I think our cultures and our traditions are sort of a little bit far away from that as well, and now far away from our UK, and they're not neighbours by any stretch of the imagination. It's a bloody 20-hour flight, and I'm guessing it's probably going to be 22 hours with all the extra checks once we be able to get out of the country with all the COVID crap and extra weight of the masks on the plane might slow them down.
Very true. And yes, 20 years, it's been over 20 years. So I think it's time to revisit, but we don't want to, we don't want to annoy anyone. So we'll talk about that in a different podcast. The EU membership as well. Another reason, EU membership has helped London cement its position as a global financial centre. So obviously London is massive in the finance sector, and this is a lot to do with the EU, or being members of the EU, because it just allows, trade and like we've said, trade to sort of flow freely within Europe. And Europe's a massive market, you know what I mean? Like we're not talking about some tiny countries and a couple countries. We're talking about Europe. It's huge, and a lot of money there, and a lot of money to be made. So by pulling out of the European Union, they might be shooting themselves in the foot, maybe. And just on that, some major businesses have actually already said they're going to leave Britain because of Brexit. Obviously, because of all these reasons, because of trade being restricted and things like that. Also more, costs of operating in Britain. They're going to actually, pull out. And there's a lot of fear that there's going to be issues at the borders, and especially with trade across the English Channel. England and France, those two countries have had a long-term sort of trade partnership there, and I think there's going to be a lot of impact on that as well. So that's why, there's a lot of uncertainty there, and it's there are a lot of negatives there. And honestly, I couldn't tell you after you're weighing up both of those two positives and negatives, Terry. I have no idea what's going to be the better option, but I guess too late. They've already decided they're jumping ship.
Just to be, on a hypothetical scenario, if you're a citizen of the UK and you had a knife against your throat and you had to pick one or the other, which, let's get rid of the knife. If you had to pick one or the other, which one would you go for? Stay or leave?
Ooh, I'd probably say leave. Mainly because I guess Great Britain's always had their own currency anyway, and it's sort of like, well, we're semi-separate to the rest of Europe anyway, and I don't know, if they think that they can be, self-sufficient and trade, and trade without being a part of the European Union, then let them have a go. I guess worst case, you could probably join back up after. I don't know how it works with the EU, man. You could probably just be like, actually, no, we made a mistake. We just jump back in.
Yeah.
What about you, Terry? You?
To be honest with you, I'd probably stay. Just in the fact that if I'm a citizen in the UK and I want to hop over to Mykonos for a weekend away,
True.
I can do that, no worries. If I wanted to drive to France just for a bit of a weekend getaway, I know I'm looking at a holiday perspective, just from that ease.
Yeah.
And also, like, imagine trying to buy things online through other countries, and like something Germany, like a Miele fridge, and you get that. Well, no tariffs, no taxes, no worries. Piss easy. I'm just trying to think it from a individual consumer's perspective. But look, I don't have a multinational corporation. I don't know the ins and outs behind that all. I know I'm an accountant, but look, I haven't, the Australian taxation law is pretty big in itself, and I don't think I have enough bedtime reading time to dabble into the European taxations, and especially all those other jurisdictions. So I guess from the commercial corporate side, there's probably some other areas too. And I do like the whole protection that it offers if we do leave, and the fact that migrating is a lot harder to do. I do like that aspect. But I think staying would be, for me, the option I would have chosen. But I guess it's very hard to pick unless you've lived in that country to know it was like in the European Union, and then hopefully maybe people were thinking the grass is greener on the other side. We don't know. And what's interesting? I mean, like, we're going to go through the consequences in a sec, but like, what's going to happen with like Arsenal, Liverpool, and all those countries in England in the Champions League? Like, they're not part of. Are they part of UEFA still? I'm guessing they're going to be. Like, I think UEFA is different to the European Union still. But technically speaking, if you're Barcelona or Juventus, and I guess, say, for example, one of the English teams knock you off, you'd be pretty pissed off, saying, hey, shouldn't they be out? But of course...
won't happen anyway.
No, that won't happen. Well, it depends, I suppose. Maybe not Barcelona, but definitely to Juventus, I think.
Jeez, mate. I reckon you're full of it.
Thank you.
Yes, consequences, Terry, you mentioned, and the future. What can we sort of see here with where Britain's heading towards, leaving this EU as it is?
Well, apparently it was official on paper in January 2020. However, it's not been fully enacted since the 1st of January 2021. So even before that, since the 2016 referendum, so between 16 and 21, it's just the even decision to leave before it's even been implemented had actually affected Britain's economy. So the GDP growth slowed down to around 1.4% in 18 and 1.9% in both 17 and 16 as business investment slumped. So just the news of it going to happen had already had a negative impact on the economy. And then obviously the Brexit's just been properly implemented on the 1st of January 2021. So you're thinking, going off that the figures might be a bit worse for Britain as well. There's been promises through Boris Johnson, who's current Prime Minister, and I guess other leaders in the past since it's been confirmed, saying that, yes, we are going to have a bit of short-term pain. We're going to have some teething issues, but once we've got it all figured out, I think it's going to lead to medium to long-term growth, which is obviously something that you want to sell as well to the public. Whether that actually happens or not, who knows? And whether there is a decline in the economy since it's been enacted. Maybe just the news of it was a bit of negative, but maybe once it's actually fully enacted and fully implemented, which it is right now, maybe it might have a positive growth, because I guess companies, individuals, groups, families have had nearly 4 years to actually figure out how to transition into this process. So they've had a lot of preparation, a lot of time. But we shall see. Interestingly enough, so as far as the economy's slowed down in terms of percentages and growth, the actual unemployment rate has hit a 44-year low, which actually means, and that was at 3.9%, which means, and that was in 2019, that's actually good that unemployment rates dropped. Yes, growth and all that dropping, that's no good, but unemployment dropping, meaning that more people are employed, is actually a positive. So just looking at the first 2 points there, Sam, of the consequences of this Brexit referendum, it's the fact that we have some pros and cons already. It's sort of, the scale seems as if it's weighted pretty equally at this stage. And once again, maybe in 5 to 10 years' time, once you're a bit older and a bit wiser, we might do another little follow-up podcast to see, Brexit 10 years on. That might be the title of that podcast. Hopefully all you stoners out there don't make up your own podcast and steal that title. We might sue you for copyrights. But also, I guess, leaning it on towards the negative scale of things.
Yeah.
There is a weakening Great Britain pound. So I guess the only beneficiaries of that would be the exporters. So now those that are actually wanting to buy from the United Kingdom, or those that you do use the pound in those countries, that it's obviously advantageous for them because it's cheaper to buy products from them with that weakening pound. However, importers, they're going to be suffering and bringing things into the country. It's going to be a lot, I guess, dearer, and then they're going to pass that on to I guess the consumers and the public, and that may have an issue on inflation. But once again, Boris Johnson, all those other leaders there on 10 Downing Street in London, they're promising that it's just, let's ride the wave of this little short-term pain and let's get that long-term gain, just like Sam in the gym.
Well, yeah, probably not at the moment, but yes. No, that's right. And it seems like there's always, with this situation, there's just a positive and a negative for everything, because imports, or exports are going to be better, but who's going to want the British pound? Like the demand for the dollar is going to go down as well. So I don't know. It's very interesting. We probably should have had our special guest Pete on the show to discuss the supply and demand of the Great British pound. But yeah, interesting. And also those tariffs at the borders there, Terry, as well. I think it might be. It might benefit, either exporters or importers, but these tariffs are going to throw another spanner in the works. So who knows?
Well, in regards to the tariffs, Sam, there were a lot of whispers saying that they were going to be imposed. However, the UK made sure that they were avoided. So they avoided those onerous tariffs that were going to be, I guess, brought on by the EUs. However, the UK said to the EU, no, we won't put too many tariffs on for you when you're coming our way. But the EU was like, if you want to come our way, well, we're going to chuck some taxes and tariffs on your goods. So they did negotiate. That's probably why it took so long to implement this Brexit deal from 16 all the way to 21. But they did avoid those onerous tariffs. However, as you just said before, Sam, there's no reason why in 3, 4, 5 years' time that it just didn't work out, that the UK just doesn't jump back into the European Union, or in 3, 4, 5 years' time, the EU's like, you know what? We've given you a waiver for tariffs. Now we're going to start implementing them. We've given you like a bit of a 5-year grace grandfathering transition period, but now we're going to start chucking them on. So nothing's set in stone, to be honest with you, and it's an ever evolving beast, shall we say?
Yes. Spot on.
What about the border, Sam?
Yeah, obviously, like you said, Terry, we've got that agreement in place to avoid those tariffs, but there's still some, logistics issues that are happening at the border, will happen at the borders, because we've got increased custom declaration requirements, increased, forms that need to be filled out, and things like that, because unfortunately, it's sort of like, putting an invisible barrier at your border now, and you have to cross that checkpoint and fill out some paperwork to get past. Because before it was just like, all right, free flowing, bang, 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 in and out, like sending a parcel to, from South Australia to Victoria. As long as you're not, sending any fruit or fruit flies in the mail, you'll be right. But it was a lot easier. Whereas now there's going to be, it could lead to increased lead-in times and delays for imports and exports within countries that are within the EU and in the UK. So, that can affect a lot of industries, because a lot of industries rely on, shipments and also, send off products and things like that. So you've got to be wary of that. Also, Britain is short of customs agents to deal with the tens of millions of these declarations that are happening. So I guess I could see it as a positive. They might need to hire some more, people to do the job. So creating more jobs maybe. But then on the flip side, if you just don't have the capacity to actually, to look at these declarations, and it's slowing down things by a month time or something, it's really going to affect businesses. And like we said earlier, it's already resulted in a few companies pulling out of the UK because of it. And also, so even like veterinarians need to carry out new health checks and things like that on animals and meat, because I guess standards and things like that will be different across the board, and the EU, I'm sure, will make sure everything stays to their standard when you're importing or exporting live animals or meat or anything like that. So they're going to make sure that the UK doesn't cut any corners, and they want to scrutinise that. And I guess it could just be a bit of a childish game. Maybe even the EU could be annoyed that the UK decided to leave, and then they might even just make it a lot harder than what it should be. So who knows? But I guess we'll see what happens.
Nothing's more satisfying than having a nice juicy, medium rare steak and knowing that cow was healthy all the way up into its death. And of course, once it did die, hopefully the meat was looked after carefully.
Yes. Yeah, well, that's what you want. You don't want no, diseased meat traveling over the border and onto your plate. Also, another interesting one here. UK nationals are unable to travel to the EU for more than 90 days now without a visa. So, not a big deal if you're sort of a frequent traveller, in and out sort of thing. You probably will have more paperwork to do, I guess. But even if you're going for a holiday for a week or two, not an issue, apart from the paperwork. But if you're going to be there, in a different country in the EU for 90 days, you're going to have to think about this visa requirement, and who knows how hard it's going to be to get these visas, because I know country like in Australia, for example, if you come from Europe, it's pretty hard to get a permanent visa, or a permanent citizenship as well, unless you sort of, are an asylum seeker or something like that. Then it's sort of fast tracked. But yeah, if you're legitimately trying to, stay in a country, it can be hard.
Just quickly on that, Sam. So that's actually just the fine print of that 90-day visa requirement. It's actually 90 days in a 180-day period. Did you know that?
Right. No.
It's basically each year split up into two periods. So if in period one, if you're there for more than 90 days, or you can't because you need a visa. And not only is that going to be an onerous task in obtaining that and extra paperwork, but it's actually maybe potentially coming at a cost too.
Wow. Okay. Wow. Very interesting. You can't even cut corners, unfortunately. Also, another consequence of this happening, there's no longer will there be automatic recognition of professional qualifications for people such as doctors, chefs, architects. Terry, could that be chartered accountants? I
think it will be, absolutely.
Wow.
So that's a massive one as well.
Huge,
so we have a lot in Australia, it goes without saying, it's not being racist or anything, but we have a lot of Indian medical professionals here. And a lot of them have done their studies in India. However, when they did come to Australia, they still had to do top-up courses and refreshers and obviously little safety standards, just to see obviously if they were competent and their qualifications that they did obtain in India were satisfactory for the purposes of Australian health and medical procedures. Mm-hmm. So it might be the same thing. And even though they might be, someone in the south of England is closer to France than than they are to their own residents in the north of England, for example. And yet, so you're closer to someone that you could actually help as a doctor than you are from some in your own country. Yet you still need there might be some more certification processes. So feeling for those I'm feeling for all professionals, because we go through a lot of study to get to where we are, and to just do more after, and to obviously finally get acceptance to do what you love to do or what you studied to do, and then having to know that someone won't take you because you need to do another course. Bloody it's kicking the guts, mate.
Yeah, it is. Actually, definitely.
Really feeling for them.
Yeah, well, they made their bed. They got to lay in it, I suppose. But I guess we'll see what happens. They might have some, exemptions, or come up with an agreement between the EU and UK. Hopefully for those people within those professions, anyway. Another one that you sort of, us Australians don't really think about, because when we go overseas on holiday, we have to enable roaming when we are using our phones and things like that, Terry. And I've done it plenty of times, and Vodafone or whoever, $5 roaming, this and that. Yeah, all right, no worries, we'll pay for it. But in the UK, if you were to travel over to I don't know, Greece or Italy or whatever, you could still use your mobile network as if you were in England, if you were living in England. Now, I think there's going to be a lot of mobile operators are going to be charging for this roaming service. So, like I said, us Australians sort of used to it because we travel interstate, we don't have to pay anything. But as soon as we go overseas, we know what's going to happen. We know we're going to have to have some kind of backup plan for our mobiles to be able to chuck an Instagram post or a Snapchat of your coffee in Rome or pizza in Rome. But yeah, apparently the Poms now and the UK are going to be having to pay for it.
Yeah, they are, and vice versa. So any European
Yes.
that would want to go to the UK are going to be charged roaming rates as opposed to the standard, what they would normally be charged per their mobile operator.
Yep.
So very, very interesting times there. And I know it sounds insignificant, but it's actually a pain in the ass, really,
Yeah,
to think
it is,
about
yeah.
it. Moving on. So
Yep.
this is actually an interesting one. I never thought about it till really, I guess, doing some research for this topic. But the UK could actually choose to ban European Union fishing boats from 2026. So obviously, they're giving a bit of a transition period to the European Union. But
Yep.
the European Union would be allowed to introduce taxes on British fish in response. So I guess it's a bit of a to and fro right there in regards to that. But the United Kingdom, right, thinking about it, they do have a lot of water. They are surrounded by water. So they'd have a lot of sea, a lot of area to fish. And the fact that, this is something to consider for them is that, if any European Union boats want to come into our waters and start fishing because it's pretty convenient and close for them to do so, well, we're going to let them off till 2026. And if they want to come past there and if we feel like it, we're going to start basically charging them for it.
Yeah. It's interesting because if a commercial fisherman has got a license to fish a certain fishery in a certain area, they've probably paid millions of dollars for this license, and then just say 2026 they've still got 5 years left on it, but these changes come into effect and all of a sudden they're not allowed to fish in that area because of this. Well, geez, they're going to be pretty annoyed about that. I'm assuming someone will compensate them for it maybe and sort of say, all right, here's the half of the money from the license back or something. But yeah, very interesting, Terry.
And it goes, obviously, it's a pretty important point. I mean, everyone thinks, who cares about the fish? Well, you know what?
No.
The Poms love their fish and chips, and fish is a big staple of part of their diet. And it's actually a staple in a lot of diets in Europe. So really, that's probably one of the bigger proteins that are consumed over there, as opposed to, comparing with obviously the land animals as well. But fish is one of those areas where the UK have a lot of sea, and it definitely needed to be considered. And I guess basically the 4 years gap, 4 years between drinks between the referendum and obviously enacting it here in January 2021, they've had a lot of time to consider every little bit of the fine print as to the consequences of what was going on. Obviously, we're just letting you stoners know just the main ones of interest to you and of interest to us. We're not going to worry about, silly red tape and retirement schemes and irrelevant stuff like that, because really, unless you're living there in the UK and you want us to cover it in a special episode, we will. We might charge you about $100 an hour. We've got a couple more, Sam, if you don't mind.
Yes, disputes that cannot be resolved between the UK and the EU will be referred to an independent tribunal instead now. That's interesting. Could be a good thing, could be a bad thing. I don't know. But hey, that's the way it's going to be now. So that's the future of disputes and dispute resolution between those two parties.
We could actually be, I guess, independent mediators for those two parties.
We could.
If they, I would think, as being both chartered accountants, we obviously abide by the 5 fundamental principles, which is integrity, objectivity, professional competence, confidentiality, and professional behaviour. So I live and breathe those 5 fundamental principles daily.
Yeah, maybe we'll get them on the show, on the podcast. Just get them to one representative from the UK and one from the EU, and we'll just really let them go hammer and tongs, and we'll resolve that dispute.
Yeah, quite easily, I think.
Yeah.
And last one, Sam?
Yes, last one. UK will not be a member of the EU's law enforcement agency, which is Europol. So I think that's a big one as well, Terry, because it's pretty easy. Well, I don't know about now, but before, like you said, easier to travel between countries. And if someone was on the loose and someone was a wanted man, pretty easy just travel between countries and remain under the off the radar and just really hide yourself in some little nook in the other side of Europe. Like it's easier to do. And Europol, I guess would have been the ones to chase up that because they're going to be traveling through 5 different countries. Now, if someone is wanted, well, I don't know what they're going to do because, if they've headed over to Brussels and UK now have pulled away from that, well, they're going to have to extradite the person back to their own country. So somehow, some way, I don't know how they'll do it, but yeah.
I guess on the flip side of that as well is that it's probably harder to get into the UK too now with, I guess, the customs and the migration processes. So they're probably looking at that. Yes, we're leaving Europol, so we're not going to have the European law enforcement. However, we're not going to be letting people in as easily as well. And if you've ever been to Europe, you will notice that there are 2 lines at the airport. There are lines for European Union passport holders. And then there's a line for everyone else. So I'm not too sure what's going to happen at passport. Well, I know I'm not actually, the European Union still exists. So for those other countries, fine. But the UK, it's going to be just probably you're going to have your residents and your non-residents, basically. So those that live in the UK and those that don't. So interesting times ahead. And it's funny that, obviously we've gone through all the pros and cons. We've gone through the consequences and potentially what's going to happen in the future, Sam. You wanted to leave. I was just off the top of my head saying, let's stay. I haven't thought about this. I probably need to sleep on it a few times, but obviously it's already been said and done.
Yep.
So, I mean, what we say is quite insignificant, but hopefully we've informed you stoners out there as to what is the Brexit, what were the pros and cons, and what were the reasons for leaving or staying to the residents back then in 2016. And I guess just some of the consequences of what's going to happen from the 1st of January 2021 going forward. So thank you for tuning in. And Sam, any last words, mate?
No, I'm really keen to see what's going to happen in the future. And yeah, like you said, we might even revisit in the future and see what the situation is. But this combined with COVID is going to be a very interesting recipe for disaster or for something. I don't know. We'll see what happens, Terry. But yeah, anyway, check out our Spotify, check our Instagram, keep up to date with us, and tune in next time.
Absolutely. Thank you, and we'll see you soon. Keep distant.